I think the storytelling strategies that I've been involved in are the ones that I think personally that I observed that work well, are the ones that are certainly planned out and given the proper amount of resources within the scope of the budget to really think it out. And I think even before that, there's some pre-work to go along with that. So if we're talking about project managers, I'd recommend that if this space you want to enter into, then plant it into your stream of consciousness right now. And so what I mean by that is that as you you continue to do your work on a day-to-day basis, just be mindful of, hey, that's kind of a neat story. And that simple step of just being aware of it, I love getting the feedback from those I work with who say, just starting to think about it, I realize I've got lots of good stories.
Hi, and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast for Sunday, the 5th of November, 2023. This is your host, Nigel Creaser, and today I've got the second part of my interview with Rob Wozny, the Storyteller. So if you're listening to this, that means you've had a week's gap from episode 1, part 1, which means that you've had a week where you've been wondering what on earth was going to be said next in the next pieces, wondering what other nuggets of information were coming from my guest. And you've had a week where you haven't been able to apply those nuggets because you didn't know they existed or what they were, which is a little bit frustrating, really, because imagine how much more efficient, productive, or amazing you could have been. But there's a way around it. You know that you can pop along to Patreon, www.patreon.com/SundayLunchPM, or to Spotify, have a look at the feed, and there's a little lock. Click on the lock and it'll ask you to pay. It's the price of a coffee. That's it. A month, and you'll get everything a week early. And you won't have bits like this in it with me wittering on about becoming a patron and things like that. So have a think. And anyway, I'll shut up now because you're probably thinking, just get on with it, Nigel. So yeah, here's the second part of the show. So I have a number of sponsors, affiliate links in the way that it's set up that have kindly allowed me to share their services, really. The first one is Mike Clayton, and Mike runs online PM courses, and it is a great resource for getting those fundamentals of project management trained, reasonably priced, and Mike presents it in an accessible and clear manner. You can check out some of his videos on his YouTube channel and kind of give you a view of where they are. But the code for that, if you go to nigelcreaser.com/online PM courses, all one word, lowercase, that'll redirect you to it. There's very different levels that you can buy. You can buy individual courses, you can buy pathways as well, if you like. And I get a kickback off those. Mike kindly shares me that. So if you do jump on and use it, I hope you find it really useful. I think he has money back guarantees and things like that as well. So there's very limited risk on that. So jump on that, and that again, it's nigelcreaser.com/online PM courses, and enjoy.
Every chapter, I start with a case study, an anchoring story. And the feedback that I receive quite considerably from those who have read the book is that we really enjoy the opening case study. And then by design, through each chapter, I refer back to the case study through the theory and the content to drive home. But it's all starting with the power of the story. And that'd be no different than if, you were as a project manager and you're working with a client, or you're wanting to reach additional clients. So let's say there's particular aspects within project management that you're wanting to serve. Well, what's an effective way to communicate that? You share, for example, a case study. We were working with client X. They had this challenge. Through our project management service, we worked with them and we overcame the challenge and we provided a solution. And now they are better off as a result of working with us as a project manager. And it's not really, as you say, about the transaction of the project manager and the client. It's really about the great work and how it makes you feel as the consumer of that story, going, wow, hey, if I work with Nigel just like he did with that client, I'm feeling pretty good. They're feeling pretty good. I think I'm going to explore this a little bit more, distinct from if you just said, hey, I have service X, Y, and Z, full stop, right? Which one do you think is going to be more powerful?
Yeah, and that a little bit of that pops up in my mind there, is the referral kind of capability, where you've got people referring when they're being a reference site kind of thing. Within it's the IT industry that I'm in, where you've got a customer that you work with and they say, will you be a reference? Yes, that's great. And part of that is writing the story of what was in there, and then you'll share it on your website, and then you'll have there, and I've seen it where you'll have CEOs or IT directors who have recorded videos talking about their experience with that company. And that's a story, isn't it? They're talking about, when we were in trouble, we were having this problem, and along came Chris Inc. and he sorted it out, and he made our lives all better, and we love him to pieces, and this is what we've changed to our business, etc. And that's what it's helped us transform our business. That gives that whole, as you say, rather than we implemented this and did this and we did that, which is dull and uninteresting. But it's what happens to it, isn't it?
And in addition to that, like take, for example, this podcast and this interview on screen, your clients or your stakeholder group are watching you, Nigel, and they're thinking, wow, he's putting himself out there. There's a lot of trepidation, generally speaking, for people to put themselves out there. Even me doing this, like I have to work at it. It's putting yourself out there, but the courage to do that resonates with people on the other end. They may or may not necessarily align with your content, and that's okay. But I think even having that connection with, hey, Nigel's at least giving it a go. I'm going to give him some time and some bandwidth to listen to this. I think there's tremendous value in that. And even in this platform, we're telling a story. You're telling a story of the ongoing journey of project managers, and I'm just a part of that journey you brought in to continue this ongoing dialogue about project managers. So good on you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I can see that again. It's again, a lot of the time. I'm looking behind me. I've got a number of books there from people who've done that. And I keep grabbing this one, and it's not because any of the others are not as good. I keep grabbing this every so often. I don't know if you can see that.
Yes.
The Change Ninja Handbook, which is an interactive adventure game. So it's an interactive story rather than being a normal, and I know Tammy's I saw today she's been now nominated for a business book award. And the approach is like the classic adventure games you used to get when I was younger, and you'd go through and skip through to the next page. And it is a story. It's a real parable. And actually, for those who don't know, the Sunday Lunch Project Manager, the concept of that was a story. It was a story that I haven't written yet. I've got it outlined, and it's a project manager who makes a Sunday lunch, and that's probably as good way to describe it. But it's meant to be funny. It's meant to be entertaining, but it's a story. And it's meant to learn and tell a parable and parody kind of thing. And again, I think that was, and the idea of that was to be able to provide education, but also in a way that it can kind of sink in. In my last book, when a lot of the time I realised that I use my experience or experience of colleagues in applying the skills, the productivity hacks that I put in there. And it's always when I did this, this is what happened. This is how I used it. This is what went wrong. This is what, and just listening, just thinking about this conversation. That's the more. Again, I'm just things just pinging out here. I've got several books up there. I don't know if you've heard of a guy called Og Mandino, who's an author who wrote a lot of self-development books.
Yep.
But they're all stories, and they're all based on stories or things like Who Moved My Cheese. That's a story, isn't it? It's a storytelling book that teaches you how to do it. So I can kind of see where the power of the story in business, in self-development, in teaching really is what we're saying, isn't it?
Yes.
And passing a message.
Well, I think in that perspective is that story unlocks a creativity within the mind. So as you're sharing the story about packing the Sunday lunch, I'm creating this visual of me packing a lunch, or I'm creating a circumstance of thinking in my story how I entered something, and it creates that connection. And that there's just something so powerful that does that. And I imagine in the work that you do as project managers, there's what's interesting, in the research leading up to this, just looking at the scope of the work that you do and other project managers, which is such an alignment with project management and storytelling is denouement. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's the nature of your work, and that is in essence kind of the essence of a story. So you could almost treat every project management, as you're saying, as that natural story, and then frame that as a case study when you work with others to say, this was the journey of this project within this project management scope, and talk about how there's a problem, solution, and how we've made things better, and all the good stuff that came as a result of that. And then creating that connection through those who want to learn more about you. That story facilitates that on meaningful ways.
Yeah, I suppose. It's a really good, interesting thing, because when you look at the, I'm not sure if you'll have heard of the PMBOK and the other bodies of knowledge and the different Prince 2 and all these different ways of delivering a project. You say at the start, the startup, the execution, your planning, all that sort of stuff. Then you close down. If you, as you say, if you took every single part of that and just went, right, okay, so what's the first day of the story? You've got as you said, that is a story of a project all the way through it. And you have some of it's concurrent, some of it's off there. And I've done a few things reading around about novel writing and real novel writing stories, and about the fact that there's a structure to a story.
Right.
About the fact that you have, if you're doing a drama, you might have a the Shakespeare's 3-act play kind of thing where they put jeopardy in. And I suppose is there something in telling stories for business and parallels to that? Is there a structure on how, if you're going to use a story to communicate, convey something to someone, persuade someone or whatever, is there a structure that you advise or you teach or whatever like that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and the short answer is yes, absolutely. I go through a number of them in a chapter in my book. There's probably there's a number of them. I just facilitated a leadership workshop last week where I was working with leaders who wanted to tell their stories through public speaking, and they asked the same question. Well, we know what we want to say, but how do we structure it? So I pulled up a couple of storytelling structures, starting with one that's probably as old as time itself. It seems as hero's journey. Take your audience on that journey through someone who is either a customer. So for example, your customer is that hero, and they start and they go on this journey, and they go on this remarkable journey in which they overcome adversity, and your product or service helps them get through that. There's atonement where they come to a better place, and then they come full circle. And I'm loosely paraphrasing it, but hero's journey is just one story in which you can you go through this cycle. There are others where even if you look at your basic streaming channels and some of the stories, the shows that you watch on a day-to-day basis, if you look at them carefully, they are following this common structures. And there's a number of them that you can refer to. Some of them start with with a bang with the end of the mine. Like think about these stories where, there's this dramatic conclusion and then they spend the rest of the show showing how they got there, right? Or they end with a cliffhanger or whatever the case may be. Those are all deliberate storytelling structures that drive you to either watch more or learn more about the content. So it's the same premise or the same premises that applies in developing your storytelling structure. There are structures that go along with it. And so what you do is you look at these structures and you think, where does my customer, for example, go along in this journey? And how does my service as a project manager take them along and get them through these various parts of the journey? So let's say looking at the hero's journey model, for example, they're starting off on the journey of, well, this is my problem. And working with Nigel as a project manager, I'm going to go through various points along the hero's journey. So he solves my problem, I'm better for it. And so it goes. So you take all your body of knowledge and then you apply it to the structure through the hero, which again, by an example, could be a client of yours, or it could be someone hypothetical. You choose, but you choose that journey in which your hero goes on. I use the hero's journey a lot in my storytelling structures, and invariably I always use my clients, with their permission, of course, and I talk about their journey.
Brilliant. It's good. Kind of makes sense. It's about, I suppose, a lot of time you'll do these storytelling kind of things off the cuff, and not maybe sit back and think, actually, how am I going to influence this person? How am I going to? How do I best? And I keep saying influence, and I keep thinking but I do think that every conversation is there for. There's some kind of, you're imparting knowledge, so you want them to know something. Therefore, you're influencing them to use that knowledge, and it made me recall a training course I went on with an actress. It's quite a few years ago now. Absolutely fantastic training course, and it was all about executive presence and about being able to plan what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And the topic I used, I was getting involved in. Doing some stuff with Amazon Alexa. So I was doing Alexa skills and creating those. It was a little bit of a hobby of mine, and I had this vision of how it worked with small businesses and how a certain feature of it could be used. And we went through a lot of different things, and I can't remember how it came to it. I think it might have been part of the teaching, Tim, was kind of putting together a structure where you say, imagine the situation. And in this instance, it was imagine being in your kitchen in the morning and your favourite bar. You ask Alexa what's going on today, and your favourite bar says, this weekend we've got 20% off. If you want to pop in, someone will give you 20% off your meal, come and see us. And it's a business owner having that level of intimacy with that family. And that was the way that I was using it in the pit kind of thing, about, because I was doing a presentation on talking about how it could be used for small businesses. And that kind of is the thing, isn't it? It's that, imagine that, you say imagine it, and immediately you're in that storytelling mode, aren't you? And then I tell that story of that happening to them and their business earning lots of money and being there. And I just think that I've been in situations, again, off the cuff without thinking about it, when I've gone with the doomsayer scenario of something. I quite often use extreme as the example. Kind of, it could be £100 million, it could be a fiver. It's going to be somewhere in there. But those sort of things, again, those are part of those different types of story structure, aren't they? Where you're telling a doom story, but then there's something that happens great later on, because you can give someone else. It's not as bad as I've just said there. So, I don't know if I'm explaining that very well.
It's choosing how you want to use it. Like you use the example of, imagine, right? I'm using like, okay, now I'm imagining, I'm drawn into what Nigel is saying to me. And then once you form that storytelling structure, that's the part of it is determining what type of story you want to tell, how you're going to frame it. And then the next part of it is how you're going to let the world know about this story, and choosing which channels of communication you want to do. Do you want to employ what I like to call as your own media network? So in this case, we're on Nigel's podcast platform and to amplify the story. But maybe you take it a step further, you put it on additional social media. Maybe you want to amplify it working with the mainstream media. It's then understanding, once you've got that story in the right place, where do I want to take it from here? And I think it's also important, especially let's say in the role of a project manager, is what do I ultimately want to achieve by telling my story? When I work with organizations for the first time in telling their story, and telling the story is broad in the sense, once you determine your objectives and the strategies and which ways you want, and ways I refer by platforms and tactics to tell that story, is what do you ultimately want to achieve with this when you're doing it? And so when I work with organizations and their teams, I also say, be prepared that if this works, or when this works, what does that mean on the operational side of this? So if we get to the point, let's say we create more inbound calls, be ready for those calls. So if you're, let's say in the case of a project manager, you go through all this effort to create this storytelling content, you push it out there, and then, on the week that you do it, you are hosting a 4-day intensive retreat and you can't answer the calls or answer emails. You're kind of missing the alignment of that storytelling. So while I am to some degree romanticizing the aspect of storytelling, it is business storytelling for a reason, because it is serving an objective to grow your business, influence stakeholders to take a specific action. But from an operational point of view, is also understanding that it does create opportunities to draw people into your business, and be ready for those opportunities as well.
Yeah, it's a couple of former guests of mine, Andy and Joel, who run a local marketing organisation. One of the things they've talked about that a lot is around where they've worked with customers that are going, right, we want loads more. Okay, so what are you going to do to scale up the team to do it? What are you going to do to scale up to be ready for that?
Yep.
And they're like, well, what do you mean? If we help you, it is going to work. That's their level of confidence. It will work. You will have to sell more stuff. You will have to deal with more inquiries. And some people aren't. I think it's that thing of not believing necessarily that some of these things will make things quicker and bigger, especially in that sales side of it. Because if you do it right, you do it right. It's a fascinating area, and I think the how to apply. It's about thinking about it. It sounds to me. Is the thing is that we don't always consciously think about how we tell a story. We either impart the facts or the story we tell. We don't think about what we want to do with that story. We just tell a story, and then actually that's not probably supporting it in the way that you could do. If there was, just thinking now of individual project managers in there delivering a project, or maybe in independent business owners as well, because I've got a few of those that I think listen. What is, if there was one thing that they could do to leverage storytelling, what's the one thing you would advise them to do, aside from buying your book, to actually leverage storytelling basically?
It's a great question, Nigel, and one that I get asked all the time. And as you noted, I think the storytelling strategies that I've been involved in are the ones that I think personally that I observed that work well, are the ones that are certainly planned out and given the proper amount of resources within the scope of the budget to really think it out. And I think even before that, there's some pre-work to go along with that. So if we're talking about project managers, I'd recommend that if this space you want to enter into, then plant it into your stream of consciousness right now. And so what I mean by that is that as you start working as you continue to do your work on a day-to-day basis, just be mindful of, hey, that's kind of a neat story. And that simple step of just being aware of it, I love getting the feedback from those I work with who say, just starting to think about it, I realize I've got lots of good stories, because sometimes as business owners, I think we have that too humble approach. Well, no one's really going to be interested in what I have to say, or my services. respectfully, I'm just a project manager. What stories do I have to share? But it's not true. You know, you're as a project manager, you're providing a very important service. You're helping people either at some level, in some degree, in a project scope, get from, you know, you may be, you know, let's say, in far as a Gantt chart, you may serve one very pivotal part in that Gantt chart to move the project along. And that is a remarkable story, but it's the people involved in it. So just being mindful of the people that you're serving and what they're saying, what they're sharing, because it's so easy to get so caught up in the day-to-day of just executing and delivering your services as a project manager that you're not necessarily thinking about, hey, you know, I just listen to the emotion of how grateful my client is, or listen to the story of how much better this aspect of their project is a result of working with us, or we got them to this particular outcome that they couldn't have achieved unless they worked with us. And there's a real sense of gratitude, which makes for really great storytelling. So I think that's the number one tip I would say, just to start if you're getting into the game, so to speak, as a project manager in the storytelling aspect, is just be open and allow yourself to say, hey, there's some great stories in my professional ecosystem that I can harvest and I can share with others.
That's a brilliant piece of advice. I think that really powerful, because it also made me think of, and if we just do it at an individual level, and even not as a project manager, just as an individual contributor in an organization, if you look at one of the biggest times when you're trying to tell your story is when you're doing your performance review at the end of the year, and you're trying to convince your management of all the things you've done through the year and how well they've been received or how well you've done them. Again, that's telling the story of those and gathering. And the big problem is you come to the end of your performance year and you're trying to remember what you did 11 and a half months ago. And you know there was something really important and really big that you did there, but you can't for the life of you remember what. So you end up trawling through emails. And I've heard of the concept of the continuing professional career management document, where when you have a significant delivery, or where you do a significant piece of work, get some significant praise, whether it's a physical folder, a digital folder, or just an Excel spreadsheet, or whatever it is, gather those little things in there. And half of them you might not use, the other half of them you can use for that. And what that also does is, as you say there with those stories, that bit of client feedback, that way that you had a gnarly problem that you and the teams to solve, keeping them in that little list of things that happened. And
I'd say
it's always the same with me. I always go down these different rabbit holes, because there's another one called listening to the Project Manager Tools podcast, amazing podcast. They talk about playbooks. Yep. And about building your own playbook of different managerial situations, about what you'd use. And that's exactly the same again. You write down your story about and it's telling yourself the story as well, isn't it, of how you dealt with this situation, how I do. It's a finance week. All right, this is what I do in finance. So if you're going to coach someone else, you can tell them a story of how you use this tool or technique to do things better.
Yeah, and with the benefit of time and research and looking into this space, you know, there's lots of different ways we could talk about this as far as tactics goes for your storytelling. But I'll return to one that you mentioned somewhere in the podcast, and I made a mental note to come back to. So it seems like the right point is in the scope of project management, you're dealing with a lot of facts and figures and stats and data. And you may think, well, you know, that's boring and I don't want to just throw out numbers and stats, but data is a great way of reinforcing storytelling. So let's say, for example, if you're talking about, you know, a project manager who helped a customer deliver on a remarkable project, pull some of that stats and data to reinforce the emotional aspect. So you're getting both sides of the brain, for lack of better terms, reinforcing the power of that story.
Yeah, I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? When you say it was a big piece of work, that's a relative term. It was a big piece of work, and you put some statistics against it. Yep. It then becomes a factual term, doesn't it? I'm just thinking we're coming up on somewhere near an hour now on our chat pretty soon, and it's been I think we could talk for a lot longer. We could tell a lot of stories.
Yes.
I think it's really fascinating. Obviously, we mentioned your book briefly earlier on, and it's there for those on the video. It's just over your right shoulder. I can see. So I think it's your right, unless it's flipped up, whichever way. You can never tell with video these days. So, do you want to just tell us a little bit about that book and just give us a little kind of a story about what the book's about and how it could help someone?
So thanks for the opportunity, Nigel. It's called Storytelling for Business, the Art and Science of Creating Connection in the Digital Age, and it's available where books are sold online and in store, and you can find it there. And I wrote it because I wanted to be of service to the concept of business storytelling. I wanted to demystify this big concept of what storytelling is. And through what I like to call a natural story arc of 11 chapters, I take the reader on where you can go with storytelling within your organization, again, anchored with stories as case studies. And that's what I really wanted to provide with this, was a resource to say, okay, this chapter, I talk about internal storytelling, and I create a case study that walks you through, as an example, some strategies and tactics, and then align it closely to a chapter working with the media, or developing what I call your own media network, which is what, much like we're doing here, Nigel, you're utilizing your social media, your website, your content to create your own channels of communication. And then I wrap it up with, even the last chapter talks about, in essence, putting yourself out there and what it means to be a storyteller, and not just as a literal storyteller, but as serving your organization and taking the chances and putting yourself out there. That there is risk in telling storytelling, but by and large, it really is worth it, because it truly is powerful on a number of levels, that connects with people and tells people how you're going to make their lives better, solve problems, influence them to do things in ways, because and all through the power of storytelling. So that is it in a nutshell.
Brilliant. Well, is it final call, really? If people want to get in touch with you, want to find you, where's the best ways for them to get in touch with you? Well,
if you do a Google search or an online engine search, you'll find me through Rob Wozny, W-O-Z-N-Y. You'll find me through there, but my website is Rob Wozny, ROBWOZNY.com. And once you're there, speaking of the book, when you land on the website, you'll have an opportunity to get access to the first chapter complimentary, and then from there you can look more into the book at that point. And then I've got some other social media or some other content aspects there. You can look through some downloads and the opportunity to join the back end of my membership site, and lots of great content packed in there as well too. So robwozny.com is where you can find me the most. So I thank you for letting me get that plug in there, Nigel.
It's all right. It's to be honest, it's one of those things where you want an hour is such a short time to cover any of these topics that I get when people on here. And I know each of my guests that are on here have got so much more to give, and there's so much more that everyone can get. So I think it's important to making sure that people can carry on the conversation if they want to. With that, I'm going to say thank you very much for coming on the show. It's a fascinating area. It's a lot of food for thought in my brain there, a few little notes down on things that I've thought about before and then let drift away, and remind me of things which I'm going to start using again and start thinking again. And it's reframed my thoughts on the podcast and how that is a level of storytelling as well. So thank you for drawing that focus for me. And yeah, well, that's it really. Thank you very much, and have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you, Nigel. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thanks again for this opportunity. A lot of fun.
Yeah, brilliant. Cheers, mate.
Okay, take care.
Another great sponsor of the show comes in the form of Air Manual. Air Manual is it's a tool for documenting process, which and best practices. It's a company formed by one of my interviewees, Alexis Kingsbury. Essentially, and I kind of summarised why my view of where we see documentation, and my experience has been, people will document something a process. They'll put it in a Visio diagram that gets loaded onto a SharePoint site or something similar, and then a bunch of that. So then once that diagram's been shared with senior management, they're happy they have a process in the business. But then the detailed procedures underneath it might be in Word documents, in just poorly kept and not linked easily and not updated. And what Air Manual does, it allows you to put in it's a tool for doing this kind of thing. You whack it in, the service in there, get in there, put in your process, your flow, and you build it down to as low a level of detail, even to the point of checklists where people can check off they've done it. So it creates that guided checklists, easy to create, easy to maintain, and all in one place. And no one's kind of rooting around to find the SharePoint, and then when you change to new SharePoint services and all that stuff, it's all there. So if you pop along to nigelcreaser.com/airmanual, there's a bit more detail there and a link there to click on to go and get. I think they offer a trial and things like that. So it's something that I think can easily reduce the amount of errors, rework, etc. within our organisations. So take a look. Well, I know you enjoyed that episode with Rob. Get out there, do a bit of storytelling and enjoy it. And come back next week. We've got Gail coming on talking about digital project management. Speak soon. Bye. So this is my final wrap up. Every week you're going to hear this. You're going to get bored of it, but you can always click next podcast if so. If you have enjoyed it, if you listen to this podcast to the end of this show and you think that was great, I'd love to be able to help Nige out. There are loads of ways you can do it. The first and obvious way is to share the podcast. Send it out to people. If you know colleagues and friends who'd benefit from it, you think they'd enjoy it, just send them the link. Grab one of the links or send them to www.nigelcreaser.com/podcasts. That's www.nigelcreaser.com/podcasts, and that will push them over to a Linktree link, and it's got all of the different ways they can consume the podcast. If you are feeling generous and have a big bag of cash, you could grab a copy of one of my books. Obviously, they're available in all the usual places, in print and digital. Again, jump on the website, www.nigelcreaser.com/shop, and that will give you a list of all the different ways that you can contribute and grab copies of the book. Also got links to all my guests' books on there as well, where I get a little bit of a kickback from them. If you are of a sporting mind, I have a number through doing some of my judo and running antics. I've managed to secure a few affiliate links and affiliates there as well. So in there, somewhere in the sponsors page, there's links to those as well. So clicking onto those and grabbing if you're looking to get super fit, then that would be fabulous as well, and I get a little kickback from those. I have a Patreon account. It's patreon.com/sundaylunchpm. So again, you can ping something in there, buy me a coffee or whatever. And finally, obviously the most important is coming back, listen again, because the more of you that come back, the more visibility I get, because there's more times that it's downloaded and all the SEO works and things like that. So yeah, that's it. So if you can help me out, I would be much appreciated. If you can't, don't worry about it. Thank you very much. Cheers now. Bye. My latest, the latest affiliate that I've got on the show now is Riverside. I use Riverside to do my interviews, Riverside FM. It kind of offers you a whole if you like, micro studio management producer tooling, and goes beyond that. Has a really good free layer, and I've been using it for a while now. I find it really good. When I've had issues, even though I'm not on one of the higher paid levels, the support has been quick, responsive, and of high quality, and people keen to help me. The organisation seems really good. The product seems really intuitive, and quality is really good as well. And it's a clever way of doing it is when you're recording through your browsers, so you've not got loads of desktop resources being used compared to some other products that I've used. And what they also do is they stream a lower quality version of it up onto as you're doing the interview, so you're not burning bandwidth while you're doing the interview and potentially impacting on the quality of the conversation. And then at the end, it uploads it, the higher quality from your browser. It's just a really good way of doing it. So if you are thinking of doing a podcast, and someone's doing a podcast, I would recommend using this tool. I found it really good. Best of the tools that I've tried using to date. And you can get that at nigelcreaser.com/riverside, and that will redirect you to my kickback page on their site, and there I will get a little kickback from them. So take a look. Thanks. Well, it's goodbye from me, Nigel Creaser, and it's goodbye from him, the Sunday Lunch PM. Goodbye.